Good afternoon and welcome. This webinar is a collaboration between the U.S. Department of Veteran Affairs, VA Center for Faith-Based and Neighborhood Partnerships, CFBNP, and the Veterans Health Administration, Office of Mental Health and Suicide Prevention Education and Training Office. My name is True Lester Pauling. I am the Senior Outreach Specialist in CFBNP. I will be your moderator this afternoon. Everyone's phone has been muted. If you have a question during the presentation today, please type it in the Q&A box on the right of your screen. I will read the questions at the end of the presentation, and the presenter will provide a response. This presentation is not available after this webinar, but a handout is available with all the resources the speaker will talk about today. This is a live recording. I want to thank Ms. Lillie Mells for this collaboration. We're grateful for your time today. Before we get started, I would like to introduce Mr. Conrad Washington, Director of the VA Center for Faith-Based and Neighborhood Partnerships. Mr. Washington serves as the Director and is a retired combat Marine with 20 years of active duty service. Mr. Washington is a licensed minister actively serving in his faith. He received his master's degree in pastoral studies from Moody Theological Seminary, a master's in business management, and a Bachelor of Science degree in education. Additionally, he is a graduate of VA's class of 2017 Virtual Expiring Leaders Program. Now I'll give you Mr. Washington for today's opening remarks.
Hey, thank you, True. I appreciate it. And I want to first thank all of you for joining us. We appreciate you. We know you have choices today. I always joke around about the buffet of webinars that they have today. So we thank you for stopping by and spending some time with the Department of Veteran Affairs, specifically our office, the Center for Faith-Based and Neighborhood Partnership. This month, we're recognizing Breast Cancer Awareness Month, also Mental Illness Awareness Month, along with Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And I also want to echo True Lester's comments in thanking our guest speaker, presenter today, Ms. Lillie Mells. We thank you, ma'am, for joining us once again to share your extensive knowledge in this very sensitive topic, but I know it's a very important topic as well. And I want to echo a few comments that Lillie will share today about suicide being a national crisis, and also that it's preventable. And she's going to share a lot of important information that is applicable to us as people who can help and help derail some of these issues that we're having. I also want to share with you the anti-Semitism, as we know, across this nation is growing, and we see that recently in the news, and it's threatening the safety of and security of Jewish people. But not only anti-Semitism that has targeted Jewish community, but really religious hate crimes around the world is on the rise, and it's traumatic for many people, victims and the families. You know, we must be able to bring people together from all backgrounds, faith, ethnicities, in order to serve our veterans, their families, caregivers, and beneficiaries. That is what this office, that is what the VA is about, and we're excited about rolling out and helping those veterans and their families. With all that being said, I hope you enjoyed today's presentation. If you have questions, please ask Lillie. She is our subject matter expert, and thank you again for joining us.
Thank you, Mr. Washington. At this time, I would like to introduce Ms. Lillie Mells, who will be providing today's presentation. Please read a summary of her bio to the left of the screen. Ms. Mells is a licensed clinical social worker with over 20 years of experience. She has worked in various capacities to include child abuse, domestic violence, and substance abuse. Ms. Mells is an Air Force veteran and has served as Director of Psychological Health for Virginia Air National Guard. Ms. Mells has been with the Department of Veteran Affairs since 2013, working in suicide prevention. Currently, she is the Education and Training Program Coordinator at the Office of Mental Health, Suicide Prevention at Veteran Affairs Central Office. At this time, I give you Ms. Lillie Mells for today's presentation. Lillie?
Thank you, Ms. Pauling. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you, Mr. Washington, for having me here today to bring forth this most important information. And so I am going to shut my camera off for a while because sometimes we get little bandwidth issues, but I will turn it back on when we are ready for the Q&A portion of the training. So first, I'd like to begin with just asking you all, I want to see who we have in our audience today. So I'm going to do a roll call. I'll start with the Army. Anybody from the Army in our audience today? Just type in the chat box if you're an Army veteran I'm looking in the box. I don't see anybody from Army. Okay, what about the Navy? Anybody representing the Navy? What about my brothers and sisters in the blue? Air Force. Okay, I know we have at least 2 Marines in the house. Any Marines? Any Coast Guard? Oh, I see my Air Force person there. Thank you. Any Guard and Reserve? And we may have our Space Force. Anybody in the Space Force? Okay. So the reason I like to see who is in the audience, because I served, I also deployed, and I deployed alongside each branch of the armed forces. And I just like to say to all that I have a deep appreciation for everyone who served, because it's a different level once you've served. And I know exactly what you bring to the table. Everyone who has served with a mission and purpose in mind, and what you bring to the table is very unique. And so I just wanted to at least acknowledge those on the line for that. And so we're going to go ahead and get started with this presentation. Suicide prevention can be a very difficult subject for many. If you have any difficulty, or if you feel like you need to talk to someone, you can step out of the briefing and talk to someone. You can call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, which is 988, or you can call the Veterans Crisis Line, which is also 988. The only difference is for veterans or active duty service members, you're going to go ahead and press number 1. Everybody else, just hang on the line and you'll get a responder immediately. Next, I want to go over some of our facts about suicide, common myths and realities about suicide, our VA S.A.V.E, which is our entry-level suicide prevention training, and then I'm going to cover some resources that you guys can use and share with others. So, by participating in this training, you're going to have a general understanding of the scope of suicide within the U.S., how to identify someone who may be at risk for suicide, because you can use these tools not only with veterans, but with others as well. Know what to do when you do identify someone who is at risk. So my second question to you all is, and you can type in the box, what are your biggest questions and concerns around suicide and talking to people in crisis? What are your biggest questions around suicide and talking to people in crisis? And so I want you to type your question in the box, and then I want you to hold on to that question. Hopefully by the time we get through this presentation, I would have answered that question for you. So now let's cover some facts about suicide. So suicide, as Mr. Washington said, is a national public health problem. It's a public health crisis as far as the VA is concerned. It's a national issue with rising rates among the general population along with veterans. And for every death from suicide, approximately 135 individuals are impacted. And I would venture to say that there's probably more impacted. When you think about communities that people live in, communities that they belong to, whether it's organizations, whether it's the gym, whether they're just serving in their community in some capacity, if they belong to religious organizations. And then you think about their coworkers, their family. So I venture to say it probably is higher than 135, but on average, we would say it's about 135. Now, suicide is a complex issue and there's no singular cause. We know that it's often a result of complex interaction of risks and protective factors. And when we talk about risk factors, these are those things that are challenges, these are obstacles, these are things that impede people's progress. And so it comes up at the individual, community, and societal level. And so what we would like to do is decrease the risk factors and increase the protective factors. So risk factors are associated with increased likelihood of suicidal behaviors. Protective factors are those things that can help offset risk factors. So these are buffers, these are tools, these are skills, these are things that people can utilize when they're in a crisis situation. And so to prevent suicide, we have to maximize the protective factors, those tools, those skills, those things that you can use, and minimize the risk factors, those challenges, those obstacles, those things that get in the way. So now I'm going to go over a little bit more of those risks and protective factors. So on the risk factor side, now one of the things is that there are many risk factors out there. We could not list them all, so we only listed a few. So this is not an exhaustive list by any means. And so know that we have a lot of individuality in this world, and so there can be a lot more things that put people at risk. But let's just go over a few that we have listed here. So first, we have prior suicide attempt. Someone who has had a prior suicide attempt does put them at greater risk for suicide than someone who has not engaged in that behavior. Doesn't always mean that they will go on and have another attempt, but it does put them in that category of being at higher risk. Next, mental health issues. So when we talk about mental health issues, all of those issues that we know about, depression, anxiety, PTSD, bipolar disorder, all of these things, especially when they're untreated. Untreated mental health issues put you at a higher risk for suicide than someone who's being treated for those issues. Next, substance abuse. So when we talk about substance abuse, anytime you're using a mood-altering substance, it definitely puts you at risk for suicide. Your mood is altered, and then your judgment is altered as well. And so anytime you're altering those things, it definitely puts you at a greater risk. Next, access to lethal means. And so when we talk about lethal means, we're talking about anything that can be used to harm oneself or to make a suicide attempt. Now, particularly with the VA, what we have seen in our studies is that the number one method being used is firearms as a lethal means of suicide. And so we're going to talk about lethal means and firearm safety a little bit later, but that's the number one means that we've been seeing in society on the veteran side as well as the civilian side. Next, recent loss. So when we talk about loss, this could be a lot of things, a number of things. We could talk about loss of limb, loss of a loved one, loss of a job. Loss in of itself creates a lot of issues for people, and it definitely can be a huge risk factor for suicide. Next, legal or financial issues, and especially legal issues when someone is facing possible jail time. So when someone's facing possible jail time, it definitely puts them at a risk for suicide. Just the mere thought of being incarcerated and not having your freedom, that can definitely put someone at risk for suicide. And then financial challenges as well. Relationship issues. So when we talk about relationship issues, those failed relationship issues. And when you go through a failed relationship, many times it can feel as if you're going through the grieving process. Some of the same stages in the grieving process are the same when you're going through relationship issues or dissolved relationships. The shame, the guilt, the denial, the anger, all of that is some of the same issues that you go through when you're dealing with grief. Next, unemployment. So when we talk about unemployment, when someone is unable to take care of themselves or their families, it definitely puts you at a greater risk for suicide. And a lot of times we'll see a combination of things, not just unemployment by itself, but you may see unemployment along with mental health issues, substance abuse. Sometimes when you see a lot of those things compiling on top of each other, it definitely puts that individual at greater risk. And then last we have on the list is homelessness. And so that's definitely another risk factor when you're out in the streets and you don't have a place to lay your head at night. Now we're going to move over to the other side and look at the protective factors. So remember what I said about protective factors. These are buffers. These are things that you can use to divert a crisis. These are skills. These are tools that you can use. So access to mental health care. So when someone is dealing with mental health issues, like I said earlier, depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, all of these things, when you're getting the proper mental health treatment for those, it definitely puts you in a better position than someone who's not. There are some things that you can work on individually. However, there are some mental health issues that require follow-up, and they require someone to monitor your care. Some even require medication regimens, okay? like schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. Those disorders require medication regimens. And when you're following those regimens, it definitely puts you in a better position than someone who's not following those regimens. Next, sense of connectiveness. So when we talk about sense of connectiveness, think about folks who are serving in the military or who have served in the military. When you're working in the military and you're behind those gates, it's a sense of connectiveness. It's a camaraderie. I remember when I served, and we would have what we call commanders calls, and we would have all the units there, and some units would have their own call signs and cheers and what have you. It was a sense of connectiveness. And so many times when we have folks who leave the military, you don't necessarily have that same sense of connectedness when you leave. When you're serving and wearing that uniform, you know exactly what your job is and you know what your mission is. And sometimes when you leave that job, you may not necessarily know what is my mission here now? What am I supposed to do? Okay. Next, problem solving. And problem solving is a big skill that most of us did not learn as children. And if we had learned problem solving as a child, we would probably do much better as adults when we come in towards crisis situations or when we encounter crisis type situations. So problem solving is a good skill to have. It's a skill that you need to learn early. Many of us, like myself, I grew up in an era where there was no problem solving. All you did was fight. You fought physically, and then as you got older, you fought verbally. But I can tell you that's not a good way to solve problems. And we really need to have those basic skills down because, like I said, when you come across challenges, if you have problem solving skills, you can deal with those challenges a little bit better. Next, sense of spirituality. This is very individualized. There are some folks who go to a house of worship. There are some who just read the Bible, some who have study groups, some who meditate. It depends on what works for that individual. But a sense of spirituality can be a positive protective factor. Okay. Next, mission or purpose. That goes back to that connectiveness. You have to have a mission. What am I doing here? How am I, supporting this community that I live within? Having a good mission or purpose, and that's why a lot of us continue our mission from the military by helping veterans. We want to continue that, and there's actually an organization called The Mission Continues. You set out to do something to help others and make it purposeful. When you leave the military, many times, you're like, what is my mission now? I spent 20 years, serving, in uniform. Now what do I do? What do I do that's meaningful? So having a good mission or purpose. Okay. Next, physical health. So when we talk about physical health, we're talking about, being able to take care of those illnesses and ailments that we have had. And there's no reason to be walking around with untreated illnesses and walking around in pain. And I will tell you this, when I wore the uniform, I had no pain. I was up at the crack of dawn, went to sleep near midnight, and that was just a routine. And you just push forward, push forward. But what I noticed is once I got out, I had more pain than I ever thought that I had because I didn't take the time to take care of those things when I was serving. And so we have to really take care of ourselves. We really have to take care of ourselves. And I see someone has asked, how does suicide blend in with whole health? It is joint hand in hand. We have to look at the whole person concept, okay? You have to look at the whole person concept when it comes to, helping someone. Their spirituality, their physical health, their mental health, and their social well-being. What are they doing? So all those components, yes, they do blend in. Next, employment. So if you're gainfully employed, that's always going to put you in a positive position versus someone who isn't. Just imagine if you're unable to take care of yourself, unable to pay for shelter, unable to pay for food, unable to feed your children, unable to buy your children clothing. That's a tough position to be in. And so when you're able to do these things, it definitely gives you a protective factor that you can do these things for not only for yourself, but your family. Okay. And last on the list is social and emotional well-being, and that goes right into the whole health concept as well. You know, you want to make sure that you're doing things that are well balanced for you as well as in your community. You know, you have to stay on top of things. You have to be align yourself with things that are positive. You know, if you align yourself with things that are negative, then you're going to start to develop that negative attitude as well. So socially and emotionally, you want to make sure that you're doing things that are helpful, not only for yourself, but as others as well. Okay, now we're going to look at some of the key findings from the 2022 National Veteran Suicide Prevention Annual Report. Now, I will tell you some of this data is a little bit old because the next report, the 23 report, is coming out fairly soon, probably any day now. So that report is coming out, but this is what we have. And so I'll report this data. This is what we have. So the number of veteran suicides, they did decrease in 2019 and from 2019 and 2020. But I will tell you, if you look at the rates going back to 2001, we were in the 6,000s already. And if you look at 2020, yeah, there was a dip. But as far as I'm concerned, that dip wasn't large enough. You know, we can't celebrate this. You know, we went from 6,796 to 6,146. That number is still way too high. So it's not a number that I can celebrate, neither can my boss, because we have to drill those numbers down, way down. Okay. And 300 less deaths is not really a huge dent in those numbers. Now, if we look at the veteran suicide rate by age and sex, and so we're still seeing our highest rate are 18 to 34-year-olds. Okay. That's the highest age group that we're seeing. And then the next group is 35 to 54, 55 to 74, and then 75 and older is 32%. And they're actually catching up to the 18 and 34. They're actually second on the list. Okay. And that's our non-veteran older adults. Now, when we look at suicide deaths and methods involved, so remember earlier I talked about lethal means. So when we talk about lethal means, we're talking about firearms, we're talking about poisoning, you know, overdose, suffocation. And then there are other methods that people use that are a smaller percentage. It could be like jumping from heights, ramming your vehicle into a fixed object, something of that nature. But if you look at those percentages, they're very small. But if you look at firearms, whether it's non-veteran or veteran, it is the highest number or the highest method that people are using. So in 2020, if we look at firearms, 50% of non-veteran adults use the firearm. Okay. Look at the veteran adults. That's the second column. 71% were using firearms. 71%. Non-veteran men, 55%. Non-veteran women. Oh, veteran men, I'm sorry. Non-veteran men, 55%, and veteran men, 72%. So over 72% of veteran males are using firearms. And then when we look at females, non-veteran women, 33%. But look at the veteran women. 48% are using firearms. That's a huge number. So one of the things that the VA has done is that we have started to really spruce up our education of, you know, lethal means and lethal means safety, okay? To ensure that people understand how important it is and how these numbers are so high that we have to get out there and educate not only the veterans, but their providers and their family members. Because if you look at all the other numbers, they don't even come close. They don't even come close, okay? So what does lethal mean safety? So in the context of suicide prevention, safe storage of lethal means is any action that builds in time and space between the suicidal impulse and the ability to harm oneself. So again, it's any action that builds in time and space between the suicidal impulse and the ability to harm oneself. And so that's the goal. We have to build in time and space in between when that person has that thought. Okay? And effective lethal means safety education and counseling, it's collaborative and it's veteran-centered. So as I said a moment ago, we have not only educated the veteran, we have also educated the providers, because a lot of our doctors and nurses and, you know, psychologists and social workers, many of them have not even handled a firearm. So one of the things that we had to do was go back and make sure that we educate not only the veteran, but our providers and their family members. The other thing that we learned about lethal means safety is that, let's say, for example, we had an individual who may have had some suicidal ideation, thoughts about killing themselves. The first thing that we would do is find out if they had a weapon and have that weapon confiscated. And to the point where the weapon was confiscated and it would never be returned. And so what we found by doing that is that a lot of people were not honest about whether they had weapons or not, because they knew it would be confiscated and never returned. So we had to rethink that and then open up another question and say, okay, you're having this crisis right now. Can we safely store that weapon? Can we safely store it with a trusted family member or friend until you can get through this crisis? And that seemed to work much better than just confiscating the weapon, permanently. And so we have found that there have been much better results from that. And so most suicidal crises are brief. Time from decision to action is usually less than 1 hour. And so you can see some of the percentages right here. We have done some studies. So less than 5 minutes, 24%, less than 20 minutes, 48%, and within an hour, 71%. Okay. So lethal means safety, it does work. So reducing access to suicide methods is one of the few population level interventions that has been shown to decrease suicide rates. And about 90% of those who survive a suicide attempt do not necessarily go on and die by suicide. And so what we found is that we have to collaborate ahead of time with the veterans, family members, and the providers. And when we have done that, we have found that it has been much more beneficial, and we more than likely have prevented suicide for the rest of their lives. Now, suicide is preventable. Despite what you may hear, it is preventable. And so now I want you guys to get ready in the Q&A box. I'm going to ask a couple of questions. I want you to type in your answers. So we're going to go over a couple of common myths and realities. So type in the box, either myth or reality. People who talk about suicide are just seeking attention. Is that a myth or reality? Let's see what you got. Is that a myth or reality? People who talk about suicide are just seeking attention. Okay, I see some myths in there. Okay, great, great. So you guys are correct. So no matter how casually or jokingly said, suicide threats should never be ignored, and they may indicate serious suicidal feelings. So someone who talks about suicide provides others with an opportunity to intervene before those behaviors occur. And so everyone who has a thought of suicide doesn't necessarily mean that they have a plan or intent. Okay. But if you've identified that, then you definitely want to go forward and ask the question. You want to ask the question and engage with them to find out what's really going on. It gives you that opportunity to help that individual. Next, the only one who can really help someone in a suicidal crisis is a mental health therapist. Is that a myth or reality? The only one who can really help someone who is suicidal is a mental health therapist or counselor. Is that a myth or reality? Let's see what you're typing in the box. Okay, we got some good answers. Someone says they believe it is both. Okay. Well, special training is not required to safely raise the subject of suicide. So helping someone feel included and showing genuine heartfelt support can also make a big difference during a challenging time. And I will tell you this, when someone is going through a crisis and what they're dealing with and what they're feeling, if you just take a moment and listen and validate their concerns, you've gone a long way. When we validate people, we make them feel that their opinion matters, they matter, and what they have to say matter. So when you do that, you don't need special training for that. All you need to do is be a good listener, okay, and show some genuine, heartfelt support. Now we're going to go over the steps of VA SAVE. And VA SAVE, it really helps communities. It's going to help you act with care and compassion when you encounter someone who's in a suicidal crisis. And this is the acronym that we use. S, signs of suicidal thinking should be recognized. A, ask the most important question of all. So I'm going to ask you guys another question. What is the most important question of all? When you're talking to someone who's in a suicidal crisis, what is the most important question of all that you should be asking them? Type it in the box. What is the most important question of all that you should be asking? Okay, I'm looking for that answer. And so I'm not going to give you the answer just yet. I'm going to come back to that. V, validate that person's experience. And just like I said, when you validate someone, you let them know that their opinion matters, they matter, what they have to say matters. E, encourage treatment and expedite getting help. So let's start with signs of suicidal thinking. So you want to learn how to recognize these warning signs. Hopelessness. And you will definitely see that, especially in veterans who are transitioning out of the military, their future is uncertain. You will see a lot of hopelessness and also feeling like there's no way out of their situation. Anxiety. We have a lot of people with untreated anxiety. Anxiety is that feeling of nervousness. Something's about to happen, not sure what, not sure when, not sure who. It's like walking on eggshells. Some people will have physical symptoms, churning sensation in their stomach. Some people will feel nauseated. Some people have a full-blown panic attack, okay? Agitation, and we'll see a lot of that. Sleeplessness or mood swings. Feeling like there's no reason to live. Rage or anger. And one thing we know about rage and anger is that usually it's a mask for something else. It's usually a mask for some mental health issues, either depression or anxiety, something in that nature. Engaging in risky activities without thinking. Increasing alcohol, drug use. And remember what I said about alcohol and drug use. Mood altering substances alters your judgment, okay? Withdrawing from family and friends. Now, the presence of any of the following signs requires immediate attention. Thinking about hurting or killing themselves. Looking for ways to die. And believe me, there's 1,000,001 things that you can do to the 10th power, okay? Don't think because you're talking to someone and they're expressing suicidal ideation and you think, well, we're sitting in this room alone. I'm just going to go downstairs and I'll be right back. There's nothing in there that they can use to harm themselves. Don't be fooled. We have seen people use all kinds of things. Just when you think a room is empty, it's not, okay? It's not. We have even seen people on inpatient wards that are really secured have found a way to do things on the ward, okay? So make sure that you are keeping an eye on that individual. Self-destructive or risk-taking behaviors, especially when it involves alcohol, drugs, and weapons. So you definitely don't want to be under the influence, depressed, and decide that this is a good time that I'm going to, handle my weapon. The judgment is off, especially when it involves substance abuse. Okay, so back to the A, asking the question. Know how to ask the most important question of all. So I see someone says, are you thinking of killing yourself? Are you thinking about committing suicide? Okay. And let me see if there's one more. Okay, I think that's it. So this is the question that you want to ask. You want to ask, are you thinking about killing yourself? You want to ask that question and you want to ask it that way. Are you thinking about killing yourself? And the reason that we want to ask this question this way is that we don't want to make any mistake in terms of the answer or the response that we are going to get. We want to make sure that this question is understood. See, because if I say, are you thinking about hurting yourself? Well, hurt can mean one thing to me and it can mean another thing to you. So when we say kill, there's only one thing, one answer for killing, one definition. So are you thinking about killing yourself? And so therefore, we're going to be able to get the answer honestly. But if you say hurt, or are you thinking about, hurting yourself, they may not be as honest as you think, because hurt for one person may mean something different for another. So we want to ask that question that way. Are you thinking about killing yourself? And when we ask that question, we're going to make sure that we use some of the do's and don'ts. So don't ask the question if you do ask the question if you've identified warning signs or symptoms. Do ask that question, okay? Don't ask the question when the person is almost halfway out the door. You want to make sure that you ask the question early enough so that you have time to react to it, okay? Do ask the question in a natural way that it flows with the conversation. So if you're talking to someone and they say that they're overwhelmed and, I could just jump in front of that bus, they may not have a plan or intent to jump in front of that bus at the moment, but clearly there's a lot going on and they're overwhelmed, and you can ask that question. You can ask that question, okay? Because it's a natural part of that conversation. Don't ask the question as though you're looking for a no answer. So if you want to get a no answer, answer the question with no in it. And the way you do that is that you say to the individual, you aren't thinking of killing yourself. Well, if I say you aren't thinking of, I've already answered the question before the individual can answer. And so you don't want to do that. You want to leave it where they can give you an honest answer. You don't want to feed them the answer. Okay? Validate that person's experience. So talk openly about suicide, be willing to listen, and allow that person to express his or her own feelings. I cannot emphasize enough how important it is to validate people. As we're growing up as human beings, we're always told, be quiet, sit down, I don't need to hear from you. And many times people carry that from their childhood all the way into adulthood. I can remember the first time I was told pretty much that children should be seen and not heard, and I can remember being maybe 5 or 6 years old, and as you get older, so imagine a 5-year-old telling you, look, hush, go sit down. Children should be seen, not heard. Okay. You join the military, be quiet, shut up and color. I'm the boss, so it's a constant barrage of your voice doesn't matter. Your opinion doesn't matter. You be quiet. And so when you validate people, you give them that platform to say what's on their heart. You may not be able to change their situation, but at least allow them, that opportunity to vent. Okay. And believe me, it goes a long way. When you validate someone, it can go a long way. Recognize that the situation is serious, because it is. It's very serious. Don't pass judgment. Reassure them that help is available. Okay. Encourage treatment and expedite getting help. So what should you do if you think someone is suicidal? Don't keep it a secret. Okay, this is not the type of secret that you want to keep. Don't leave him or her alone. Remember what I told you, even an empty room can be dangerous. Don't leave him or her alone. Try to get the person to seek immediate help from his own doctor or the nearest emergency room. Call 911 or call 988. And I meant to tell you guys earlier that the crisis line number, it used to be this 10-digit number, has now changed to 988. So you don't have to go through the 1-800 and all this and that. You could just dial 988. It operates just like 911. And if it's a veteran or active duty service member, you just press number 1. Everybody else, a responder, will take the call. When talking with a person at risk for suicide, the first thing you want to do is remain calm. Don't get all excited, agitated. You want to remain calm. Listen more than you speak. Remember, allow that person to vent. Validate what they're saying, okay? Maintain good eye contact. Act with confidence. Don't argue with that individual, because there's so many topics in this world that we could debate on. But many of them, you'll just end up in a pissing contest. Politics, religion, abortion, this. There's so many topics out there. It's a no-win situation. Everybody has their heels dug in. So you don't want to get into that debate. Use open body language. Don't be like Macaulay Culkin on Home Alone. You want to be inviting. You want to be caring. You want to limit your questions. Let that person do the talking. Use supportive and encouraging comments. But be honest that there's no quick solution, okay? There's no quick solution, but help is available. Help is available, okay? We have had people, say, oh, they're 8 months behind in their mortgage. They're going to kill themselves. They need help. The reality is nobody is going to pay 8 months of your mortgage, but there are resources out there to help. Okay. What do you do if someone expresses suicidal ideation during a phone call? You want to keep that caller on the line. Don't hang up or transfer the call. Remain calm. Get as much identifying information on the caller as you can. Name, phone number, current location. Even if they use a nickname, just take it down, whatever you can get. If you can, only if you know how to do this, conference call to the VCL, the Veterans Crisis Line. But don't hang up until the responder has actually answered that call and you can actually hear the responder talking to the individual. Okay. I don't transfer enough calls in a lifetime to become really good at it. So I never transfer a call. Our call center operators, our switchboard operators, they're very good at transferring calls. And so I leave that up to them. Enlist your coworkers for assistance. Use instant messaging, Teams, use your cell phone, whatever you need to do to get some assistance. Okay. If you're talking to someone in a suicidal crisis or having suicidal ideation and their call disconnects, call them back immediately. If you don't get an answer, go ahead and dial 911. Let them know that you were talking to someone and you got disconnected. You would like for them to do a welfare check. Once you finish doing that, then you can call 988 and let the crisis line know that if you were talking to a veteran, this is what occurred, and they will follow up as well. Okay. And that was our VA SAVE training. So signs of suicidal thinking should be recognized. Ask the most important question of all, and that question is, are you thinking about killing yourself? Validate that individual's experience. Let them know that they matter, their opinion matters, and just let them know that you're here as a good listener. Show some compassion. E, encourage treatment and expedite getting help. And now I'm just going to cover a few resources that we have. And so I think we went over what we do if a caller calls. So some of our resources. So this is our Veterans Crisis Line, which is also the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. The only difference is that if it's a service member, you just call 988 and press number 1. Anybody can call this number. It's open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Veterans, service members, family members, friends, you can even call anonymous if you're trying to get someone help. Crisis Line actually stood up in 2007 and has been going strong since. And you can see the referrals and the calls that we've had. Almost 7 million calls, over 800,000 chats, almost 300,000 texts. And this data might even be a little bit old because it was March. So I'm sure we're over 300,000 texts, 1.3 million referrals, and over 269,000 dispatches of emergency services. And when we talk about dispatches of emergency services, we're talking about actually going to the location of the individual. The VA has what we call local suicide prevention coordinators, and there's at least one at each medical center. And in some cases, they may be more, depending on how large the medical center is. But anytime a veteran or service member calls the crisis line, a consult is submitted to the local suicide prevention coordinator. If it's something that needs to be taken care of immediately, then dispatch of emergency services will happen. If it's something that can wait, a referral will be sent to the suicide prevention coordinator, and they have 24 hours to reach out to that individual. And they do monitoring, they do outreach, they do a whole lot of stuff. And this is our Veterans Crisis Net resource locator. You can go to this webpage, put in your zip code, city and state, and your local suicide prevention coordinator. You can get their name. You can get which medical facilities are close to you off of this locator. Making a Connection. This is a series of vignettes where we have real veterans talking about their challenges with mental health and how they overcame it by seeking care at the VA. Practice of safe storage of firearms, medication, and other lethal means, keepitsecure.net. This is one of our partners that we've been using. We also use NSSF, the National Safety and Sports Shooting Foundation. They have been so gracious to promote 988 and gun safety. New lethal means safety resources. This is where we have updated our resources, educated family members, providers, and the veteran. Here we have some mental health apps, mobile apps. They're all free. However, we just let people know that they should use it in conjunction with their mental health provider. So these apps are not made to cure everything alone, but they can be used as a treatment enhancement. Safety plan, we have that now, which is you can upload on your phone, and a safety plan is a written list of coping mechanisms that you can use during a crisis. There's 6 steps, and you can have that on your phone. And anytime you get in a crisis, you can refer back to that safety plan. And some of the steps are like, who can I talk to? What are some of the things I can do? What are the places I can go? You know, is my weapon secured, stored somewhere? All of that you can have at your fingertips on the phone. Coaching in the care. This is a resource for those military folks, veterans who have not opted to get help, and the family members are having a hard time getting them into care. They can call Coaching in the Care and get some good tools and resources of how to get that member in the care. And Coaching in the Care will even speak to the member themselves. Now we have more resources for LGBTQ plus community. This is something new that has come out, but you know, we're just trying to provide resources for all those who have served. Postvention resources. We don't talk about postvention much, but we understand that, you know, things happen and that we do need to be prepared, whether it's the community or the workplace. And so we have postvention resources for that. And then our VA SAVE training, the one that I just gave, we have a shorter version, which is on our partner website, PsychArmor. This training is free. It's about 25 minutes. All you have to do is just log on to their website, no cost. And we just encourage you to share it with communities so that folks have at least some sort of initial suicide prevention training. And then that's all I have. And so I'm going to turn it back over to Ms. Pauling.
Thank you so much this afternoon, Lillie, for that wealth of information. We really appreciate it. Right now, there is one question in the Q&A from Mr. Anthony D. Lucia, and he says, way down is not a rate percent number. How important is it to be quantitative for our planning purpose?
I'm not really sure I understand that question. I can take that one back and look at it in the office.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. DeLucia, for that question. We will get back to you with an answer. I do not see any more questions in the Q&A box at this time. If you have any questions for Ms. Mells, please forward it to us and we'll make sure she gets it and she'll get back directly to you with a response to any questions that you may have had. At this time, I'm going to turn the mic back over to Mr. Washington for closing remarks.
Thanks, True. Hey, Lillie, great job. Once again, we appreciate you. We're not going to let you go. We're going to make you an extension of this team. So thank you for joining us and sharing suicide prevention today. Thank you all for joining us. And if you want to continue to connect with us, whether than you can see on the screen there, you see our website, go to our website, sign up for our webinars that we have each month. We have 3 to 4 on a wide array of veteran-centric topics. We look forward to you connecting with us. Until then, be blessed and stay safe.
Thank you so much for joining us today. If you registered for this event, we will have a recording of this webinar on our website at a later notice. Please subscribe to our website and Facebook for future webinars and information. This adjourns today's webinar. Thank you and have a great day. Bye-bye.
Thanks again.
Thank you, Ms. Mells.